Welcome to our kitchen. Andrea is slowly recovering from a bad flu, so also this week I present our new video with two flavorful medieval recipes prepared with beans. We start with the ingredients. We need black-eyed peas. Then, for the first recipe, we need eggs, onions, aged pecorino, olive oil and the spices, black pepper, nutmeg and cloves. For the second recipe, we need smoked pancetta, or bacon if you prefer, long pepper and saffron. First, we soak the black-eyed peas in cold water for a few hours. We discard the water and boil the beans in new water for 40 minutes. Many of the legumes called beans in modern-day English are classified in the genus Phaseolus and come from the New World. But in the Antiquity and Middle Ages, the word Phaseolus referred to a different kind of legume. When in a medieval manuscript we find the Latin word faseoli, usually translated as beans, or the medieval Italian fasoli, we must use beans from a plant of the botanic genus Vigna. Renaissance authors, such as the physician Mattioli or the naturalist Felici, describe several varieties of cultivated beans and distinguish between local and newly imported beans, calling them fagioli turcheschi. Black-eyed peas were the most widely cultivated local variety before the discovery of the New World, at least in Italy. Meanwhile, we grind in the mortar the spices for the first recipe. The author tells us to use good spices. We chose 3 of the most used spices in the Middle Ages: black pepper, nutmeg and cloves. This recipe, as well as the one we'll prepare later, is part of an anonymous 13th century manuscript, written in Latin, titled Liber de Coquina. We find both the recipe also in an anonymous Tuscan manuscript that translates most of the recipe of the Liber de Coquina, often with a variation and additions. Then we slice 1 onion. We find onions in many medieval recipes. Among the varieties of onion cultivated in the Middle Ages, the 15th century physician Michele Savonarola describes the big round white variety we are using for this recipe. We also find it illustrated in many illuminated medical manuscripts, De Taquina Sanitatis. Now we grate the cheese. We are using an aged pecorino. The author just tells us to use aged cheese. Pecorino and Parmigiano, described in detail by Pantaleone da Confienza and mentioned also by Giovanni Boccaccio, were among the most common aged cheeses in the Italian Middle Ages. We suggest choosing among these 2 for a good outcome of this recipe. Then we beat 1 egg. We pour the olive oil in a pan, and when it's hot, we add the onion. We fry the onion at not too high temperature until it becomes golden and soft. Then we add half the pre-cooked black-eyed peas and the spices. We cook for a few minutes. We didn't add salt because the pecorino we are using is quite salty. We suggest tasting the cheese you chose and, if necessary, adding a pinch of salt. Then we add the grated cheese and egg, stirring for a few seconds. Plate and serve still hot. We suggest not overcooking the egg. We are cooking outdoors in winter, but indoors, the residual heat after removing the pan from the fire is enough to cook the egg and melt the cheese. Now we prepare the second recipe. We soak the saffron in warm water. Then we grind in the mortar the long pepper. The author doesn't tell us what kind of pepper to use. We choose long pepper, the most prized pepper since the antiquity, but you can use also black or white pepper. The author titled this recipe Ad usum Marcie Trevisine, which can be translated as custom of the March of Treviso, suggesting that this recipe was typical of Treviso, in northeast Italy. Now we cut the smoked pancetta. We chose smoked pancetta, but you can substitute it with bacon or any cured pork meat. The author just tells us to use cured meat. He uses the word carnibus salsatis, which refers to any uncooked cured pork meat. We suggest using a cured meat with a good amount of fat, because there are no other cooking fats in this recipe. But we are sure that the author doesn't mean to use cured pork fatback, because in other recipes he always specifies it. Indeed, cured pork fatback was used mainly as cooking fat. We cook the pancetta until the fat starts to render. Then we add the black-eyed peas, the saffron soaked in water, and the long pepper. We cook for a few minutes or until the water dries. Salting and smoking were among the most common ways to preserve fish and meat, usually pork, since the antiquity, as described by Cato and Columella. Now we are ready to plate and serve this bean dish still hot. These flavorful recipes are delicious examples of how a common legume such as bean can be prepared in different ways that enhance its flavor, creating refined dishes suitable for a noble table. If you're interested in ancient food and flavors, or you're just looking for unusual and delicious recipes, please subscribe our channel.